Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Joel and Adam for another installment of the 12 Days of Fistmas, even though we're into January now, so we're sort of, going past the deadline we had set for ourselves, but we're gonna marshal on in the spirit of Fistmas and try to complete this. I don't know what number we're on. We're on like 6, I think. I could be wrong. I think we're on the 6th. Today we're doing the Road Warrior. Before we get to that, I do want to give Joel a quick moment to just talk because the 12 Days of Fistmas are related to Joel's RPGs, and so I wanted to give you, about a minute to just kind of, yak on the topic.
The 12 Days of Fistmas. What are we going to call this? Sponsored by Lone Wolf Fists. No, I love that. Okay, so I'm actually going to pitch your game and my game today because actually last night I happened to be reading both Righteous Blood, Ruthless Blade and Lady 87 and trying in my mind to find a way to Venn diagram them both together for an outstanding Wuxia campaign. So high marks on both of those, by the way. Fantastic products. Let me see. How about today we talk about Blood from God's Eye, our free intro adventure with Lone Wolf Fist. It has flesh-eating monsters, Abrams tanks. It has a dead god that you can fist fight, all for free. A quick introduction to the game, enough rules to crash course your way through it very quickly and easily in the first couple of pages. An entire adventure, which can serve as the first plot arc for a campaign if you have a mind. Introductory characters that are rich and have art. Yeah, it's a fantastic little game. Doesn't cost you a bloody thing unless you want it to. You can leave me a tip, which I will use, of course, to buy more art and make the game as fisty as possible. And also, here in the next couple of months, I've been doing the writing for, and we're going to kickstart Acid and Steel. So if you want to add demons, damned heroes, robots, robotic heroes, and an entire universe of both of those things to your post-apocalypse, you'll now have the entire toy box of awesome, explosive things in front of you to enjoy that with. So keep your eyes open for Acid and Steel kickstarting soon.
And Joel used the term sponsored. We are not paying Joel any money for this, so I just want to be clear about that.
I'm not paying you losers either.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That's what I meant to say.
He's not paying you, Brendan.
There's no
shut your
no
mouth.
Sponsorship in either direction is the point.
No,
this is an unsponsored podcast. We make $0 on this podcast, which explains all of the bells and whistles that we so
every dollar we make goes into our production values.
Which is no dollars. So so anyways, we're doing the Road Warrior. The Road Warrior, or Mad Max 2, as people in Australia like to call it, is a 1981 Australian post-apocalyptic dystopian action film directed by George Miller and starring Mel Gibson. In the post-apocalyptic Australian wasteland, a cynical drifter agrees to help a small gasoline-rich community escape a horde of bandits. That's the IMDb breakdown, that last sentence there. I don't know if you guys want to object to that overview or if you think that's accurate.
That's about right. I mean, it's a bit, it's kind of high level. Like you have to, but yeah, no, that's accurate.
It's a movie about a guy, right?
There's a protagonist in this film. Whoa, blowing me away here. All this detail. What an analysis.
I did see Adam Bristol when I said Mad Max 2, as the Australians like to call it, though. I detected
I mean, obviously that's what. Well, I mean, everyone in the world but Americans calls it Mad Max 2. To clarify, but I don't have an objection to the Road Warrior title. It's like it was a smart move by the studio. They knew Americans hadn't seen the first Mad Max movie. It was people wouldn't go if they thought it was a sequel. And Road Warrior's an excellent title. So No, the fact if you want to make see me bristle, bring up the fact that it was released dubbed in the United States originally, dubbed with American accents. That would make anyone bristle. And I think if anyone goes back and can find the original theatrical cut in America, you will not be happy.
I'll bet the first version I saw was when it went to video. Was it like that too, or was it just?
Yeah, in the 80s. Anytime I'd see it on cable in America in the 80s, it would be the dubbed version.
Because I saw it. I have distinct.
Oh wait, no, it's the first one. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up. It was the first one that was dubbed. They didn't dub Warrior.
Okay, all right.
I'm getting my movies we're reviewing confused. So
That's all right. That's a reasonable.
I take back all my criticisms. It was a brilliant American release. They did everything right.
I remember seeing this one on VHS in like 1985 or 86 during the summertime, and very distinct memories of it. As we, well, let's. What is everybody's thought on this movie? Like, is there anybody in the room that hates this movie? Number one, or is there anybody that has any gripes with it?
There is Get Out Now.
Yeah.
No,
no one has brain damage here, Brendan. This movie is fantastic.
Yeah.
Who could dislike this film?
I'm sure there are people that dislike it. There's got to be.
That you know what? It's one of those things where like that's where like that tells on them more than it tells on the movie, right? Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, this is almost universally critically acclaimed at the time too, which
it's
kind of surprising.
But I mean, what does that mean? Like 70% of critics liked it or something, right? So there's got to be like 30.
No, but my point being that it would have been easy for critics to write this off as, oh, it's a trashy action movie, blah blah blah. But it's like, I mean, critics really like this movie.
Isn't this even more well rated than the first one, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, it is. I kind of read through some of the original reviews from the time, and a lot of them were like, "Oh, this is so much better than the schlocky first movie," Of course, they did write that one off.
As I said in the last podcast, I prefer the first one. I like them both, but the first one is more my kind of movie, and I still maintain that, having seen this again. The last time I saw this was on a tube TV in the mid 2000s, so quite a while ago.
I would say the differences between the two are that it did the clever thing that Alien did, where the second one is a different genre to an extent. Yes. It's like the first one is a very gritty 70s revenge movie, and this is mythic. It's like mythic science fiction in the future, and it's not really connected to our world in a lot of ways.
My note was kind of similar. What I said was the first movie felt like an action drama, and this movie feels like an action adventure. But I kind of like your phrasing better of the first one, because the first one is a revenge movie that really captures the spirit of that film better.
And this is mythic in the standpoint that you're being told this story by an old man who remembers this event from his childhood. It's a legend he's telling.
Well, we could start there because the framing is pretty interesting.
Yeah,
the narration.
Well, that's new too, right? We didn't have a narrator in the first one, so like that immediately kind of does something very different.
Yes.
Well, and it's deceptive because there is an old man in the movie, and you think he's going to be the guy that's narrating it, or maybe it's Mel Gibson, but I think that it speaks of him as another character. So probably,
I wouldn't assume it was him.
It could have been a pop.
It also doesn't preclude the possibility of Mel Gibson's character dying if you frame it like that, which I think was smart, because there's a lot of times where it looks like, oh, he's had it. Especially when he leaves.
There is a way to kill the narrator. You can kill the narrator, but because he's an old man, it wouldn't work in this case. But if you had him narrating with his last breath after it happened, that could certainly explain it.
It would be a ghost.
Baron Munchausen. That was one of the many instances in which I died. Right?
That'd be great. Okay. Yes. That would have been fantastic, but also maybe not fantastic in a way that
it would have ruined the movie. I think it would have ruined the movie.
I think that's safe to say.
No, but the whole setup of you don't know who the narrator is. I kind of even this time around, I kind of forgot that it's the kid, and I thought it was like the old man or something. And I was like, oh yeah, it's the kid. But I like how it ties in with the core themes of the movie, because the kid is just like this grunting feral. I think he's called the feral child in the credits, right? Like he just looks like not even human, right? There's just something off about him, and then so he ends up being
Lost Boys from Hook.
Yeah, that's exactly what he looks like.
Yeah, but now this is one of the all-time great child performances in a movie. I have to say, it's
assisted
so good
by the boomerang. The boomerang.
Yeah. Starring the feral child, co-starring the boomerang. Yeah. Boomerang has one of the best scenes in the movie too. So.
But I mean, the whole like Joe, I guess this sort of ties into what you want to get into with the sequel topic too, because like you were saying, this is a direct sequel to the movie. This follows the character Even
Yeah.
though, like Adam said, it's interesting because it follows it in terms of story into the next phase in his life.
It does.
But like Adam said, we're now getting into a different genre where he's in the realm of myth now. He's, and this is all about like the loss of humanity in the post-apocalypse. And like to the point that Mel Gibson is literally eating dog food. The kid is making dog-like sounds. There's just a lot of like animalistic, like the people in the I forget the name of the group, but the bad guys in this, they're all behaving like animals, right? Like there's one, like they're literally, having sex on the ground in one scene during like and it's not portrayed in a glamorous, sensual way. They look like, they look like beasts on the ground.
Dirty and savage, and again, it's a new world order, and it's clearly kept in check by violence and conquest and debauchery. Like, first of all, I love that. That's great. But second of all, like, one of the interesting things about it, and the more I think about it, the more impressive I think this is. It has almost exactly the same plot beats as the first movie, and Mel Gibson's character has the same fate that Goose does in the first movie. His car crashes, and it explodes, and he's hauled away from it. But unlike his friend, who just became like this burned out wreck, he gets kind of redeemed and taken care of by the society and has a moment of true redemption. So, like, it's really impressive as a sequel to the first one. When you really just look at these two movies as a first half and second half, like, it's an amazingly different experience than the way I came to it, which was I came to this movie second, but coming from Thunderdome. Thunderdome was first, This was second, and then later I watched the first one, the Mad Max, and I always sort of saw them as this one large mythical thing, kind of like Star Wars. I came to Star Wars not as first, second, third, but as, oh, this is Star Wars, and it was 3 movies, and that was the complete thing. But I think it plays differently when you watch Star Wars as the first movie alone, and then watch Empire. Like, it's a hugely different way to look at it. It's the same way with this. You get a very different experience if you think of this as the end, the last half of the story. Mel Gibson has a beautifully complete arc in this, and it doesn't make Thunderdome seem any less fantastic. I don't want to diss that movie at all, because, man, Thunderdome is great. But Thunderdome does this thing. Yeah. Oh, it's great, right? It's fantastic, and it's kind of the thing that turned this into the sort of mythic trilogy it became. But it does a thing where it takes this post-apocalypse thing and says, no, that's the new paradigm period, and every film has been that. But like the first two didn't have that. They were a night and day aliens contrast, and it's fascinating to watch them that way.
I think there is, I mean, I like Thunderdome too, but I do think it's fair to say that these two are both much tighter movies, and they don't, there's like not as much fat on them. The pacing in both feels much better constructed. For me, where Thunderdome's
the weakest of the 3, but it's still, I just think it's still good. I feel like it gets overly criticized in my opinion.
No, you shouldn't. It's same thing with Return of the Jedi, where that's the weakest of the first 3 Star Wars.
I don't think so. I think it's. I think the first one is the weakest, actually, of the Star Wars.
Really? Star Wars?
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. The first one is the weakest Star Wars. Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi to me, and here's the thing. I went back and forth between whether I liked Return of the Jedi or Empire better. And I also recall in Clerks there was that whole thing where they were debating that very question.
That. That's like the Gen X debate. So.
No, but what I was getting at is I remember growing up, most people thought Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes. Most people my age thought that those were the 2 good movies, and Star Wars was just the one that kind of got the ball rolling to them. I mean, I know that not everybody would agree with me, and now after the internet, everybody's conform their opinion to the internet consensus.
Yeah, well, once again, it's a crucial age difference thing again, because I did see the first Star Wars movie in the theater, and I do remember for years it being Star Wars was Star Wars, and that was it. It was the one movie. Yeah. So, but I don't know. I think the first one is fantastic. I think it's perfect. But
it's damn near close to it.
I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I just much prefer the second 2 to the first, if I'm watching films.
The thing is, and I think with both, you could actually have that preference, and I don't really think it's arguable. I think you really could legitimately just say these 2 are the stronger. They have a more cohesive narrative arc. They feel like the first and second half of the story. There's lots of good arguments to be made, and you can make a lot of those same arguments for these films. If you want to look at this as the beginning of the Mad Max legend, and like the rest is like a prehistory to it. Then the last two films hold together thematically in a stronger way because they're both post-apocalypse. They both have this sort of mythical element to them. The character is established during both of these last two. You know, like you can do that. You can also hold that same opinion here. I think that's fascinating, and I think I think the consensus in this group is that the first two are the stronger and the third one's the weakest when it comes to Mad Max. But I feel like you could argue it the other way too.
Yeah, well, the third one's interesting too because, as you say, this the first movie you've still got remnants of civilization, and this one everything's collapsed. And the third one is an interesting contrast because you have Annie Entity and her in Bartertown. It's like Bartertown is civilization is starting.
Well, it's the unification of the two warring civilizations in this film. The barbarism and the sort of humanity and structure and infrastructure linked together. Bartertown is this new fusion. The true new way forward is Bartertown. That's why Annie Entity just drives away at the end. She's just like, I already won. I won before I met you, bro. Bye. What a fascinating ending. And it is a really interesting film. We're going to have to do that one too. I don't necessarily want to do all the Mad Max movies in the 12 Days of Fistmas.
No, I could do that one. I like Thunderdome, so I could definitely.
No, like I said, we can do it separately from 12 Days.
I also just want to make one Parthian shot about Return of the Jedi before we go on to the next topic, which is I'm talking about the original Return of the Jedi, not the ruined version.
I'm talking about the original movie.
That needs to be understood by our listeners.
Yeah, because people don't get that they completely changed the music in the Jabba the Hutt sequence, and that ruins the film.
That ruins it. Yeah. I'll make my final Star Wars point too. I mean, the weaknesses for Return of the Jedi for me is that it cheats on things that's set up by not paying them off. Like Empire Strikes Back sets up the love triangle between Luke, Leia, and Han, and third one's like, they're siblings. There's no conflict, and Luke's like, oh, okay, fine, great, and Leia's like, yeah, fine. That's one of the things that it's like, okay, it just felt like the cheapest way to pay off one of the central conflicts set up in Empire Strikes Back.
I just want to say though, it did add a lot of discussion to the whole story. True. every you can't watch the first and second movie through the same eyes once that decision was made. But I do agree with you. Actually, I think it was kind of a cheapo move.
It's just but like I said, it's a great movie. It's just a comparative level. It's like Return of the Jedi is fantastic.
But getting back to this, I think that the thing that I love about the narrative thing is that the movie to me I think really is about the reclaiming of your humanity, and so just the fact that the narrator goes on to become this eloquent human character that can speak and everything is kind of a nice framing for this sort of movie. It feels like it's a very well thought out film the more you watch it.
And again, that makes such a great sequel to the first one, which is about losing your humanity and becoming feral and going to the waste. Oh man, damn it, that's really good. That's such a good observation. I never even thought of that.
Well, I like how he is in this movie. I think and this is just because it popped up in the trivia on Prime when I was watching, and I would have never noticed this. I did notice he didn't say a lot, but he only has like 16 lines of dialogue or something, like some really minimal level of dialogue, which was intentional. Miller wanted that. But that makes him less human, right? He's like people are trying to have these human interactions with them, and he's just not engaging them. Do you know what I mean? It's and so but it also works for an action movie because there is that sort of established trope of the silent masculine hero, and so he sort of
this is very much a Western too. It's like being mythic, but it's like you could just remake this movie as a Western by just changing a lot of details. It's usually
a small town in the West overrun by bandits that replace. I guess it could be an oil well or something else. It would necessarily
It could be a lot of things. I just maybe get a gold mine personally, but because that's very Western.
One thing that struck me too is like the part where they're watching the camp, where he and the gyrocopter pilot are watching, where they're up on that high point looking down. It's like that was very reminiscent of in the Two Towers when they're looking at
Mm.
the gates of Moria. And there's also the scene when he gets rescued on the gyrocopter. I'm like, this is the same shot of the Eagles rescuing
Yep.
Frodo and
Was it
Sam.
what? There
It's the
was another
same
movie
shot.
that was that. Was it There was a '70s movie that had that shot on the helicopter with the.
Oh, it
Uh,
could be. Yeah.
I
Well,
could be
the
wrong.
gate thing too. The gate thing too also harkens back to Wizard of Oz when they're looking at the witch's castle too. So once again, I'm
Well,
not saying it even comes from Road Warrior originally, but it's
What I liked,
this.
what I liked about that shot though is number one, it was
Yeah.
beautiful because
Yeah.
like Mel Gibson has sort of made a career out of playing Christ-like figures, right? Like that's sort of been his thing. And so he has this moment in the movie where it's very much that kind of moment. But the scene where
Yeah.
he's on the helicopter and he's getting lifted up, and you see the actual geography of the conflict underneath him. And
Yes.
I found that very interesting this time. Where I was like, oh, you can see here's the encampment of the bandits, here's the town. Like and it was a really beautiful shot. It was like very well framed, and that's another part of this movie that I really like is that it's beautifully photographed. Like it just like the framing, and I wouldn't have
Yeah.
noticed that at all growing up watching it on VHS. That wasn't and on
No.
my old tube TV,
Part of you
even in the mid
always notices
2000s.
that. Movies are such a
Well,
visual thing, you know.
one thing, of course, we saw it pan and scan originally though. So
Oh yeah, I guess you
you
did.
didn't really see the shot. So
Yeah. Yeah,
everything's uglier in pan and scan.
it's like I used to think that all the kung fu movies were just like these really like I thought they just
Mhm.
shot them choppy, they didn't care, and then you'd see like a King Hu movie later on and be like, oh my God, this looks like Stanley Kubrick, and you had no
Yeah.
idea that you were watching something that was like a masterpiece. And with Road Warriors the same. Like until I actually saw it in widescreen, I didn't realize how beautiful the film was. I don't want to oversell that because it's a gritty early '80s movie, so it doesn't have the gloss that people might expect with the newer movie. But
Well, that's
really
between production value and vision, though. This movie has vision. That's what makes it so compelling.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
production value, though, I mean, the technology didn't exist back then in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
So
So
this
yeah,
was apparently the most expensive Australian movie up to that point. Whereas
Mhm.
the first movie was really low budget. I guess that's why he wanted to do this one, was he didn't feel that he could realize his vision with the first movie. I kind of think that it upped the game a bit because he had to work with whatever he could, and I sometimes think that makes things more interesting. But
oh, absolutely.
but you can tell that this is his movie. Like he made the movie he wanted to make.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so I have I have a philosophical question, I suppose. If this movie is about the contrast between the savagery of the wastes and reclaiming your humanity, how then do we look at the Lord Humongous character, who is an extremely eloquent and intelligent and strategic character?
I think, I mean, I don't know. I guess in a way he kind of represents like, I guess you could say he's like the barbarians, right? But then there's the fact that he's so eloquent and all that.
Yeah,
So maybe he's just an
temperate,
alternative. It might be that there are these two paths forward that humanity is choosing between in the movie. And one is the town that's obviously a little bit more civilized and they retain their more, compassionate human qualities. And Lord Humongous is somebody he has the veneer of civilization. He can speak eloquently, but he's this brutal, savage warlord who will like rip you in half if you disobey him, and none of his men flinch at death at all, whereas the people in the town are much more clearly affected by it, with I think the exception of Wes. Wes is the only one that I remember really having a reaction when his boyfriend dies, but
Mhm.
you know what I mean, but the other ones just don't even seem to care. Possible I missed it. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen the movie, but yeah, I don't know. I think that's the thing that makes Lord Humongous interesting, is that he's this grotesque figure who he actually sounds like a reasonable guy when you listen to it. But that, like, okay, that moment in the film where he's like, I will let you go and you can live, like, just give me the gas. That's all I want. And you can keep your lives. I don't think he was going to spare their lives. I think he was going to.
Well, the fact is, it's not a good offer anyway. It's like, oh, you can wander off into the desert to die. I will give that to you. It's basically what he's offering.
But no, true. But don't you think that once they dispersed, he would just have his men hunt them down?
Yeah, totally, no question. Well, even if he kept his word, it's still, yeah, I'm going to let you go kill yourselves out in the wasteland. Bye.
Yeah, it's not. It isn't a great offer because he's offering them the choice between savage death or a slow and painful starvation, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not even no matter how you look at this, it's a bad deal. Even if he's like, take as much gas as you want, leave me the pump and leave, they'd get their civilization, and at some point in the future, it would have been overwhelmed by barbarians who had the resources that they had. You know, it's on a long scale, on a short scale. Even if he was a man of honor and kept his word, would the next Humongous have done that? Probably not. You know, I think that the eloquence of him in a lot of ways is genuine. I think he might have been a man of his word, but I think that the core of his philosophy, the fruit of it, was that barbaric monstrosity, which was the society that was under him.
Yeah.
You know, that was the promise of it. So I don't even think it was the veneer of that. I think it was, you can use humanity to create savagery. That's what created the whole apocalypse in the first place. You know, it says at the beginning of the movie, their leaders talked and did nothing. And it's like, well, there was a lot of humanity, humility, and technology. Look where it got us.
Well, I think another way to look at it too, though, is that he is the people he has under them. They're all just barely under his control, anyways. Like, he has to really work to keep Wes in line when Wes wants to just go and get revenge right away, and he's like, no, we have to do this my way. And so, yeah. So I mean, you could argue that maybe he's a more complicated character. Maybe he is this civilized guy, but he understands that he's containing all of these. You know,
I mean, what is he bargaining
evil...
for? He's bargaining for the fact that, you know, I can come in here and fight you and use up resources and lose men, or you can let me win and not lose anybody. I mean, it's a case where he's bargaining with them from the angle of, hey, make this easy on me. I'm giving you nothing, but make me not have to waste my resources storming the fort.
Well, I think
there's nothing. He's giving up nothing here. He's just asking for them to make things easier for him.
Well, so a couple of things. Well, he's giving them their lives. That's the argument that he's making. I will let you keep your lives.
Yeah.
That is the.
Like I said, the argument. Well, and once again, as they're going to die in the wasteland, he's not even giving them that, though. He's, it's.
Well,
but I don't know. It's a matter of it's an intangible debate here anyway. Can't say.
Well, I guess because without the gas, they probably can't make it through the wasteland. So you're probably right that they're going to die. Yeah. But there is the question of how much of this is Lord Humongous making these kinds of decisions versus him following whatever, the momentum that he's trying to sort of direct with all of these people under his control. You know what I mean? So
that's another good point.
Yeah.
How much control does Lord Humongous truly have? He seems pretty inviolable, but at the same time, there's a lot of very dangerous.
Look at what he has to do. He's a gigantic, muscular guy with a hockey mask, and he's like, his flesh is burned off or something. I don't know what happened to his head, but I feel like he's sort of abiding by prison rules or something. Do you know what I mean? Where, he's just going to be the biggest, strongest, the meanest. Also, apparently that character, originally they were going to have that be Goose from the first movie, but they decided against that.
Perfect.
Well,
that would have been perfect, though. Ooh.
It would have been. Well, it would have maybe been too much of a convenience.
So what's the source on that? I kind of looked for that story and I couldn't find it anywhere.
I found it in a bunch of different places. I don't know if I actually found. So maybe we'll call it speculation for now, because I saw it in Wikipedia, if I remember. But I also saw it in other sources, but I suspect they were also getting it from Wikipedia.
I've also the thing is I also found uncited speculation that Papagallo, the guy in this, that basically he and Papagallo were part of the same military unit at some point too. So
I think that was based on something George Miller had said.
Okay.
So I think he was asked in the 80s in an interview, and he said that something about them being connected, but apparently there was a fan theory that Lord Humongous was Goose, and I think that later it was found out that originally when they did the script, there was this idea of doing that, but that it was abandoned. It was never actually part of the story, but it was a thought. But again,
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know what the
it is
sources are.
certainly better for reasons of verisimilitude that that's not the case, right? It's better if this guy just came out of wherever he came out of, without any connection to
Yeah.
the films, characters, or events. Dramatically, it's not quite as rich. If this was Goose, it would have been fantastic. If he just turned into this feral, mutant, muscle-bound
Well-
monster that retained some element of the charm of the original Goose, but had become nihilistic. Oh, man.
It could have worked if the thing is, it would have been hard because Mel Gibson hardly talks in this movie, but you would have had to have a dramatic scene between him and Mel Gibson to make
That's-
that, you know?
Yeah.
That's why,
Yeah,
even if it
that's
was an idea they worked on, it's not carried out in the movie. So
Yeah.
it's
No,
like
no, not at all.
there's really no way to yeah, because once again, I mean, Goose was in positions where he would have recognized Max
Yeah,
anyway, so
exactly.
there would have been some reaction. So it's a thing that is not actually in the movie, but might have been.
Because you could easily envision a sort of join me, join
Yeah.
me, like that would have been a very easy scene to write.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
absolutely.
yeah, you could have gone that way, but
We're not
as
so
you
different, you and I. Yeah, no, there's no scene like that in the movie, which I think is a strength of the movie. We're not so different, you and I is a bit of a trope, right? And I don't think that leaning into tropes necessarily makes them more dramatically satisfying.
I don't think they would have
Yeah.
gone that direction. I don't think they would have said you're more different or you're not so different, you and I. I think it would have been more you're responsible for what I became, so you owe me. You know what I mean? Like that.
There's
kind
also
of
ways you could have taken
Yeah,
it, but
yeah.
even still, I think that those are pretty well-worn tropes. Even at the point that this movie was made, they were pretty well-worn tropes. So making Lord Humongous completely distinct lets his philosophy and his character stand on their own within the context of the situation, and it doesn't
Yeah.
burden it with that kind of messy emotional connection, which I think
Yeah.
would have overshadowed it.
And he's not
this,
Goose.
well, going on with that trope, of course, this came out the same year of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which actually does do the "oh, you're not so different than me." It literally has that line in it. But
Yeah.
What
one
movie
step.
started that? Do we know where that originated from? What movie?
Almost certain that's originated in Shakespeare, dude. Like that's very old.
There's
Yeah,
always a good
that's
chance.
Good question. You guys talk, I'll look.
But anyways, Lord Humongous is too much of his own character. Goose doesn't look like that.
Fantastic.
Goose would have had to gain so much height and weight just to look like Lord Humongous.
Yeah, it would have been a very different character. I do think that it would have been interesting. But no, I sort of like it the way it is better. Now that I'm kind of rolling it over in my mind, it's like, well, I understand why you would do it. On the other hand, I think doing it this way simply gives you something more unique. I don't think we would have remembered it quite the same way. We would have just only thought of him as Goose. And here we think of him as Lord Humongous, Yeah, no, I think this is, ultimately, I think this is stronger.
What do you think of the way that the crier introduces him?
The Ayatollah of rock and roll.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, there's so many things that just make you pause and contemplate them in this film. That's certainly one of them. There where it's like, okay, that scene and the scene in Thunderdome where they have kind of a similar thing where right before the Thunderdome battle starts, they have the guy with the weird super large shoulder pads, like talking about how the world of old was destroyed. Both of these like show you that the culture that has fallen into myth in a lot of ways, and we're picking up random pieces of it and making this new culture out of it. They're serving the needs of these new people in this new world order. So I think that's really fascinating. Like no one in this world that we inhabit would be called the Ayatollah of rock and rolla. Like certainly not someone that you wanted to be intimidating, but they're taking like the chunks of those elements that mean something still to people and combining them in this new and unsettling way. I really loved that line. I think it beyond any other line in this film, I think that's the one that really sticks with me. It really shows something about the world that George Miller made.
Well, it also kind of almost feels like the guy is just sort of ad-libbing what he's saying.
Yeah, it
Right?
doesn't feel
Like,
rehearsed.
because if you stop and think about it, you go, wait, Ayatollah of rock and roll, like what exactly does that mean in the context of the setting? That doesn't mean anything. That's
What?
just a meaningless
Though,
sort of
that it
grand. No,
doesn't-
it works. It works. But what I'm saying is, it doesn't have any literal meaning that you can decipher. You know, I don't think Lord Humongous plays guitar or does anything that would warrant being labeled the Ayatollah of rock and roll. They have other issues pressing it, but it also kind of like, you know, I like that. I like the fact that this guy is just kind of, I don't know, he's just winging it, it seems. And I think what he's trying to do is just sort of intimidate them, just sort of, you know, really build up Lord Humongous. They understand, you know, that this is what you're contending with. This great man that is gonna, you know,
the fact he has a hype man says so much about him. Like it communicates to you on this almost genetic level how this guy keeps control of his posse of wild and savage barbarians.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you got into an altercation with somebody at the mall and they had a hype man. And the hype man starts just spelling out what your doom is going to be in the next year. It would be intimidating, I think.
It is. It's very intimidating.
I also just like the look of the guy. He's got like the glasses, and he's not very good at making decisions. He tries to catch the boomerang that he just saw cut somebody in the head with, and slices his fingers off.
I love everyone laughing at him and him reluctantly joining. It's like that character. That's the other thing. That character. Oh, I mean, I think he's called Toady in the credits. It's just he is such a pathetic, groveling little character. It's so good.
And that shows how cheap life is too in this setting. Like he lost some fingers and nobody gives a shit. It's like, you know, he barely cares that he lost fingers, you know.
Yeah. Oh man.
His survival mechanism is absolute submission, and you know he does survive for quite a bit of the movie, so that does work.
So I guess we really have to talk about the action sequences in this, and we should probably start with the final sequence, which is probably the most iconic. Where he's driving.
It's so iconic. They made it into its own entire movie in Fury Road. So.
I was thinking about that. I think that's the fundamental thing that turned me off to the idea of Fury Road, because what I heard people say about it was that it's all that sequence.
Very much so. That dominates Fury Road.
But what I like about this movie is that it isn't all that sequence. There's a lot of other things happening, and then that sequence emerges as the climax, which I like. But I wouldn't want to be overwhelmed with just an ongoing. That was kind of my problem with Thunderdome. The final sequence went on too long, I thought, and it didn't have any of the creativity of this sequence. I thought like it was fine, but this scene is so creative, and they have very they're clearly thought out moments over the course of the chase scene where it's like a little mini story that plays out.
It's interesting because I remember I would always hear back in the day, like the Road Warrior is just one long chase scene. Like, it's often said in a positive way, not a negative way, but it's like, it's not. You know, whether you hear it's a positive or negative thing, it's not one long chase scene. But it's interesting too. I'm just bringing up the truck scene. It is, once again, I already mentioned like Raiders of the Lost Ark came out the same year. It's funny that like the two movies with the most iconic truck chase scenes came out the same year.
Maybe
so, like,
truck filming technology had just reached an apex. That
must be it.
It was really great. This scene like really stands out to me because the amount of vehicles that are involved and the amount of wide shots where you see all the vehicles. And again, the fact that this is a movie. I mean, obviously there are stunt men, and I'm sure in the scenes where there are men jumping from one car to the other or whatever, they're probably slowing down and doing all kinds of things for safety reasons. But it just feels real. It has a very sort of grounded, real feel to it. And it's super exciting. Like it's just crazy stuff is happening. Throughout the
despite it being so bombastic, like you talk about the scale and all the motion and the explosions and everything, but like despite that, it knows to draw your attention in on the characters, the stakes, and the tension. Who's going to die? Is this wound fatal? Are they going to be able to make some kind of miraculous last stand? Like there's so much about it that draws the tension out. Like just Max getting more wounded and the cab getting more and more breached as things get worse and worse in this chase sequence. It's just so tense and wonderful.
And the brutality of it, like the scene where that guy gets the hook stuck through his leg, the grappling hook.
Oh.
It's
and it's he's dragging an entire car. Like when it flips over, it's like having that going through your leg. It's just like, oh my God. It's
that had to hurt. That had to hurt.
Just a little, yeah.
And then when you find out that the truck doesn't even have gas in it at the end.
The ending of this is so good.
Yeah. It really is.
Yeah.
And you're thinking like, wait, is that cheap movie gas? Are they like using grains of sand because they want the camera to pick it up? What's going on? And then you're like, oh no, it's sand. It's filled. No,
they really filled that thing with sand, and send them on a wild goose chase that killed enough of them that their infrastructure was collapsed.
Yeah, it's also interesting too because it's like you can view it as being them just using Max as a chump to like be a decoy, but the fact is, a lot of the guy who hires him, whose name I'm blanking on, he's there.
Pappagallo.
What's that?
Pappagallo.
Yeah.
No, not is that? Oh yeah, Pappagallo. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's like he's there. He goes along with the truck. It's like it's not like he hires him and then gets on the bus. It's like he and a lot of the key figures do go along on the decoy.
He dies. So Pappagallo dies.
Yeah, as I'm saying, it's interesting ambiguity that they did kind of use him, but they still put themselves on the line too. It's kind of fascinating.
Well, and I think they didn't tell him either, right? Like he looked kind of shocked when he saw the. Yeah, you know what's cool too? Pappagallo actually telegraphs what's going on because he says to the boy, "Get on, we won already. Let's go." Right? So like, and you're thinking like, "Wait, you won? This does not look like victory to me." And so they do foreshadow the truth. I think you might even see. I think there might be shots while it's driving of the sand coming through, but it's probably not quite as clear what's tumbling out of the truck. But yeah, I thought that was interesting that he showed up. I think him and like all of the warrior capable people, or most of them, were kind of present on the truck, is what it looked like.
I like to at the end the way just the remaining members of the gang, when they see sand coming out of the truck, it's like they're just gone. It's like they could have gone over and tried to kill Max or something. It's like, no, okay, we're done here. Bye.
Yeah. Well, at that point, like all their greatest warriors were dead too, right? Because Humongous explodes and then his second in command dies. So yeah, I think for the most part, they weren't really people with a plan. They were short-sighted hedonists and barbarians. So
yeah.
They didn't know where the gas was. They assumed it was all gone. Why would they assume something different? The refinery exploded. This was a decoy. So at this point, it was just a ploy to get them out of there and deny them the gas.
Yeah.
But they took a bunch of the gas with them. They didn't have the kind of foresight or tactical thought process to think about that. So they fucked off back to the waste where they likely died.
Yeah.
That's great.
I also like that the place they're going to is like on a postcard, and they're sort of anticipating this paradise, and you really wonder what it's going to be like when they get there, because it looks an awful lot like where Mel Gibson came from. You know what I mean? Like I don't know where it was, but I have a feeling it's probably in the same condition of where he just came out of.
Why don't they show an overview of the ruined city at the end? Like, yeah, it wasn't great when we got there, but with the gas, we were able to make our own culture.
But I like that the gyro captain becomes the leader of the people as well.
Well, I like that because again, they sort of telegraph it in the movie. He has the sort of strategic, thoughtful, consequential mind that's also inventive that allows him to be a leader of this kind of people. Like he's blow for blow outwitting Mel Gibson at the start of the movie, which is really impressive. Fassman might have a weapon under there, so you got to do this.
Yeah. That's true.
He's the one who's flying over the whole conflict. So in a vehicle he invented, like that guy's leadership.
He becomes their leader. He becomes their leader too. They mention at the end. So
Oh yeah, he's leadership material. I'd vote for him in a heartbeat.
I like his relationship with Mel Gibson in this too. It's a very, it's a kind of lopsided relationship, but that sort of works because he's sort of winning the audience over the course of the movie, anyways. Like, by the end, he's sort of more heroic. And at the start, you're not really sure what to think of him, and then he's sort of sneaking away with the woman, and so it's like, okay, he's like, but then he.
Well, that's the fascinating thing. It's like Max goes off on his own at the end, but he brings both the gyrocopter pilot and the feral kid. He's the thing that pushes them into becoming part of the community again and becoming human again to an extent. It's an interesting interaction.
He alone in the movie has the capacity to appeal to someone like Max's humanity and bring them back into the fold of civilization. No one else manages that. He's the only one. So that gives him a certain power to re-civilize people that have been like destroyed by the world being like it is. So yeah, I think that he's the guy. He's the guy I would want to be in charge of the post-apocalypse.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, you want a person that's smart like that guy. A guy who can make a helicopter seems like he'd be very, very useful.
But yeah, he's creative, inventive, cunning, but also able to bring people back to their humanity. Like, that's pretty impressive.
What do you think that guy's backstory was? Do you think he was a professor? Do you think he was an engineer? Do you think he was just some loser who just knew a lot of shit and was building things?
Me as the kind of person that's like, and I know these people because I grew up in the sticks, one of those kind of backwoods hicks that can make any machine work. And they have this certain kind of mind where no matter how much something is garbage, they see what it could be. And I think that's the guy that could fix the post-apocalypse.
Okay. Yeah, he was a very interesting guy.
Surprisingly eloquent take. Wow, what the hell's wrong with me today?
No, I agree, Joel. That's the answer. I agree with that completely. That just fits.
I guess we didn't mention the dog. That does bear some discussion because a lot of people get upset when the dog gets done in by the But that's I also feel like there's a weird relationship Max has with the dog, and I couldn't help. Before I used to sort of think as the dog is the thing that humanizes Mel Gibson. But I noticed this time around that he actually regains his humanity when the dog dies. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I wonder if the dog is like, sort of him latching on to the dog is because he is more at ease with animals than people. And so
I don't think you can argue it otherwise. Like, it's a substitute for a human connection is that animal connection. I love the dog too, but like, you have to admit that the dog and him are like, they have a lot in common at the beginning of the movie. They're animals who can survive and take solace in each other's company. But whenever he loses the dog, the replacement he finds is not only humankind, but like the dream of the future.
The dog's almost a barrier between him and people. Like it's the thing that prevents him and the gyro captain from really connecting early on.
Yeah, it's the illusion of self-reliance. The car too. Like, the car was something that was like a prize that he won, that was an instrument of vengeance for him. Its destruction in a lot of ways is the death of that part of him. He no longer can live for vengeance or for that pain. Like, he can't do it anymore. Like, there has to be something else that drives him. There's a lot of beauty in this as a sequel to the first movie. It really is a fantastic film.
Yeah, no, it's a very good movie. I mean, it definitely is. I know I mentioned that I like the first one more, and simply because it's just more my style of film. And but this one I think is still a really good movie.
I kind of consider them equals as far as. I mean, the big difference is I brought this up when we reviewed Mad Max, the original, that it's frightening in a way that this movie is. And it's like I get a sense of fear and suspense from the first one just because it is closer to our reality and there's still normal people around. It's like,
there's something
it's
truly
like this
frightening about that.
Out of nowhere. But
it's like
this movie doesn't frighten me, but it's a fantastic action movie.
Well, Joel said before the podcast that this movie commits to it being an apocalypse, whereas in the first one, not every character is aware that they're in an apocalypse yet. Some people know, the bikers know, but like a lot of the people that they prey on do not know and are still living normal lives. So I think that I think that ambiguity is the thing that works about the first movie for me. Whereas, I mean, this works too. It's just that it puts it more firmly in action adventure territory for me.
And once again, I think it's good going back to the Aliens comparison. It's like if they tried to go with the same tone as Mad Max again, but with a bigger budget, it's like that. Nah, you already did that perfectly. Yeah. It would be dumb. It would be like if it's a sequel. Alien was just. It's another crew, and they have encountered an alien, and it's on their ship. It's like, okay, great.
I think a big budget sequel. Too would have detracted from the focus on the characters that the first one had. So it would have been a mistake, I think. Because
making this a mythic, epic story with the money was the right way to go.
So I guess that's the end of the discussion. We've been going for almost 50 minutes now.
Oh goodness, yeah. I think that's enough for now.
What was our next movie? I know were we gonna do Game of Death next? Was that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So we'll do Game of Death.
Initially, we were going to do Fist of the North Star, but I think that Game of Death is the next movie.
So for people who don't know, it's a Bruce Lee movie. It's considered a Bruce exploitation film in a way. It's not that it still stars Bruce Lee, but there's only like 20 or 15 minutes of actual footage of him because he died during the making, and so they get another actor. Kind of Plan 9 from Outer Space style to wear sunglasses and the infamous yellow tracksuit. But it's still an interesting film, and I wanted to see that one first because I thought it might be it's kind of corny in a way because of all of those elements, and I thought that might be interesting, and then maybe down the road we'll see a more proper Bruce Lee movie. But this might be a good palate cleanser for post Road Warrior, and then into Fist of the North Star. So, all right, I guess we'll end it there. And until next time, we will talk to you later.